Hsin is coming to Wuthering Waves in version 3.7, and her newly revealed kit is completely breaking the conventional DPS formula. Today, we are taking her leaked dual-form Electro mechanics and directly comparing them against the current hypercarry meta to see if she is an absolute must-pull or just an expensive luxury unit. By the end of this breakdown, you will know exactly if your hard-earned Astrite should go towards securing her banner, or if you should save your resources for a different rotation, because I am going to give you the unfiltered, mathematical truth about how she actually performs on the field. Now let us establish exactly what we are looking at with this new unit. To be completely transparent, a lot of the highly specific multiplier data and frame counts I am about to discuss are pure leak territory from early beta cycles, so expect those exact numbers to actively shift before release, but her core mechanical identity and kit structure are officially locked in. Hsin is not just another standard Electro DPS character designed simply to output higher damage numbers. She is shaping up to be one of the most mechanically interesting characters coming to the game because of who she actually represents within the overarching lore. Up until now, we have spent massive amounts of time seeing powerful characters like Jinsisi, Cardia, and Imeth operate purely as Sentinel resonators. This means they are inherently connected to Sentinels and only gain their power by borrowing or inheriting it through that specific relationship. Hsin completely shatters that existing mold because she isn't a resonator connected to a Sentinel. She is the actual Sentinel herself. That single detail alone makes her one of the most important characters introduced so far from both a narrative and gameplay perspective. We are completely moving away from borrowed power and stepping into a tier of character design that opens the door for complex mechanics that simply wouldn't make sense on standard resonators. If you look at how Genesee completely changed the expectations for cinematic, high-flying gameplay, how Cardia introduced her own highly stylized combat identity, and how Imeth brought wildly impressive mechanics that immediately stood out from the rest of the roster, you start to understand the insane design pedigree we are dealing with here. Because those previous characters set such a high bar, Hsin has a massive foundation to deliver an unprecedented gameplay experience simply by functioning as a literal, playable sentinel. Mechanically, she operates heavily around a dual-form gameplay state, which immediately raises her skill ceiling. While we don't have the exact motion values on how seamlessly these stances swap mid-rotation, having two entirely different combat states historically translates to far more rotational flexibility, highly technical combo routing, and a significantly more satisfying moment-to-moment gameplay loop compared to traditional characters that remain locked in a single, static stance from the beginning of a fight to the end. Alongside this stance-swapping framework, she is introducing a completely different, brand new version of the tune break mechanic. She isn't simply benefiting from the current tune break system that we have optimized over the last few patches. Instead, this brand new iteration suggests an entirely different methodology for interacting with enemy stagger bars and dictating vulnerability windows, rather than just passively relying on an existing combat formula. Whenever a character introduces completely fresh gameplay mechanics instead of just offering raw base stat increases, it demands entirely new team-building strategies, highly specific rotation mapping, and entirely different engagement tactics, ensuring the unit stays relevant in the meta for a very long time. But the absolute core of her high-level playstyle, and what will ultimately make or break your account's damage output, revolves around her massive expansion of the negative status system, specifically an intricate effect called Electro Flare. This mechanic is surprisingly deep once you start mapping out the combat flow. When you apply Electro Flare to an enemy, it functions as a localized debuff that deals periodic electro damage over time, instead of front-loading and triggering all of its damage immediately. Here is where the strict synergy locks and technical execution come into play. Every single time that Electro Flare naturally activates on the enemy, half of its current active stacks are immediately consumed. Since Electro Flare naturally caps out at exactly 10 stacks, your overall damage potential directly scales with how efficiently you can manage and replenish that stack count. The more active stacks you maintain on the target, the exponentially stronger each individual damage trigger becomes. This design deliberately rewards technical players who can weave constant elemental applications into their rotation, heavily punishing those who simply mash their standard attacks as quickly as possible without monitoring their debuff uptime. Thankfully, some of her standard electro attacks naturally apply these vital electro flare stacks, tying the mechanic directly to her active combat flow so you are consistently attacking to maximize your output rather than pressing a single disconnected button and swapping out. the entire system scales even further when you hit the theoretical stack ceiling. When you execute your rotation perfectly and reach the maximum 10 stacks of Electro Flare, any subsequent applications you land aren't just wasted into the void. Instead, every single extra stack you apply automatically converts into a powerful secondary resource called Electro Rage. Electro Rage acts as an advanced scaling layer sitting directly on top of your existing Electro Flare debuff. Rather than dealing its own independent tick damage, Electro Rage acts as a massive stored multiplier that dramatically increases the damage of your next Electro Flare trigger right before it disappears. Just like the base flare mechanic, Electro Rage can also stack up to 10 times, meaning there is an entirely separate secondary resource bar that high-tier players can deliberately build up before unleashing a devastating, screen-clearing damage explosion. This creates a highly specific and rewarding combat progression loop. First, you execute a rapid opener to aggressively build 10 Electro Flare stacks. Once those stacks are completely maximized, you maintain your offensive field pressure to funnel applications directly into building Electro Rage. Then, when your next Electro Flare activation triggers on the timeline, all of that carefully hoarded Electro Rage is instantly converted into an overwhelmingly powerful damage multiplier. This dictates a kit explicitly designed for players who want to build serious momentum over a longer boss encounter, reaching massive, meticulously planned damage spikes, rather than dealing all their damage in a single 2-second animation. Because of this highly specific, backloaded mechanical loop, you simply cannot slot her into any generic hypercarry team. Her strict team building requirements are just as crucial to your success as optimizing her raw echoes. Right now, Electro Rover is shaping up to be an absolute premium teammate for her specific playstyle. Since both characters obviously share the Electro element, and Hsin's entire kit revolves around these specialized, high-uptime electromechanics, Electro Rover acts as a perfect engine to complement her rotation. Depending on how the final beta frame data settles, Electro Rover will likely be mandatory for helping to maintain that constant, crucial electro pressure on elite enemies, ensuring your flare stacks don't decay while simultaneously contributing heavy off-field damage to support Hsin's overall rotation. Moving beyond standard synergy, we have Sway, who has already firmly established herself in the current meta as one of the absolute strongest supports for any team composition that revolves around capitalizing on the negative status system. Because Hsin's core damage loop is directly tethered to the Electro Flare negative status, running a premium support that is deliberately designed around scaling negative status mechanics feels like a perfectly crafted, mathematically optimal combination. When version 3.7 officially launches, the Trinity composition of Hsin, Electro Rover, and Sway is heavily projected to become one of the most interesting and highest scaling team compositions available in the game. In this rotation, Hsin serves as the primary driver, introducing her unique Electro Flare mechanics. Electro Rover acts as the dedicated battery and elemental pressure maintainer, and Sway seamlessly supports the entire negative status ecosystem while amplifying the team's overall field performance. However, this brings me directly to the honest value caveat, and I need to be completely objective here. Because Hsin demands such strict stack management and requires specific elemental teammates to truly maximize those intricate Electro Flare and Electro Rage multipliers, she is undeniably a luxury pull. If you are a more casual player who simply wants to stay in one stance, press a massive burst ultimate, and instantly delete a wave of overworld mobs, her strict dual form rotation is going to feel punishing and overly complicated. If you mess up your field time management and let your stacks drop off prematurely, your damage profile is going to fall off an absolute cliff due to that punishing half-stack consumption mechanic. She requires you to deliberately ramp up momentum over extended encounters, making her theoretically incredible for high-level endgame hologram bosses or deep Tower of Adversity runs, but she will likely feel incredibly sluggish and cumbersome for quick daily overworld farming. Older, front-loaded burst characters are simply going to feel much more comfortable for players who just want a relaxing session without constantly monitoring dual resource bars. Ultimately, Hsin isn't just relying on one standard feature to sell her banner. She is bringing together several completely different design philosophies to reshape the current meta. She delivers a highly technical Electro kit utilizing dual forms, introduces a brand new iteration of the tuned break system, exponentially expands the tactical depth of the negative status system through the complex interplay of Electro Flare and Electro Rage, and carries the massive prestige of being the game's first fully playable Sentinel. While there are still specific beta details and exact scaling decimals we are waiting to confirm, she already demonstrates one of the absolute strongest foundational kits we have seen for an upcoming character. If you have the patience to master her specific rotations and the established roster to support her strict synergy locks like Electro Rover and Swayzway, she will reward your account with one of the most mechanically deep and satisfying damage outputs available. Keep a close eye on your Astride economy, evaluate your current support roster, and decide right now if you are ready to invest in a unit that demands absolute rotational precision to unlock her true potential.